6 or 7 months. We put legislation forward. Originally, it had some really substantial reductions in our fees that we'd be paying. As it got worked through, that has reduced. There was a lot of pushback on moving funding to the general fund and taking it off of timber landowners. And there were a lot of reasons that that structure changed. We saw a nearly 40% increase in our, that's 35, I guess, 35% increase in our costs to close to $250,000, and is what we were projected to pay in 2024. So the intent was to try to bring that back down to something that was reasonable. It's still, what is the bill that is still alive still has a reduction for us, but it's in the neighborhood of about $40,000 at this point, which is still improvement, but it is not what we wanted to see. So Association of Oregon Counties took a position on it, support. That was a lot of that had to do with eastern counties with marginal timber landowners and grazing land. They were basically seeing fees that they couldn't support the resource. So they were seeing families looking at selling ranches because they just couldn't support it economically. The hope is that this bill passes this session. It's a first step. It reforms some of the funding. It does some indexing so that funding grows over time. So it doesn't have to go back to the legislature to keep up with inflation. It also shifts some of the costs. It basically makes it so that all the Salem costs are borne by the general fund. And then because that was where that shift came from. Why our rates went up so much is that the district, Central Oregon District, and the other districts started having to pick up a bunch of general fund, what should have been general fund. That's all administrative, yeah. What historically would have been general fund. So this takes it back to where the funding that what we're paying for is paying specifically for fire protection in our district. So that is an improvement. It still needs to change. There was an increase in the harvest tax. So it does increase some of what we pay in the harvest tax. There's another bill that's moving that would reinstate severance tax. That actually, Senator Golden is hoping to put that on the ballot. And then there's another one that's moving along that would create a statewide fire district with a 25 cents per thousand tax base that would then cover a lot of the fire cost.
The severance tax proposal, does that put that money into the counties or into the general fund?
So what he's put forward now is a percentage of that would go back to counties. So historically, it all went to counties.
Right.
So no, there would now be a pretty good chunk of that that would be retained in Salem for statewide issues, and then a chunk of it would go back to the counties. So how much of a likelihood that has passing, I don't know. I think that the bill that we have moving has a good chance of passing. The Senate bill, I can't remember what the number is, 4133, I think it was, Senator Steiner's bill. It has a reasonable chance of passing. I think there's decent support for it.
And this is in the current session.
This is in the current session, yeah. But the expectation is that working group will continue after this session to look to the next session to solve some of the issues that couldn't be solved in the short session. So it will require. I did throw Doug under the bus and say that Doug may be willing to step in and serve in the seat that I was in. AOC is going to have to decide how they want to handle that. But Doug did attend a meeting in the past, and he knows as much as anybody, I think, about wildfire funding and kind of the issue from a county perspective. So somebody will need to step into that spot. It needs to be somebody representing counties because that was the original intent.
Right.
And one thing that I don't think most people know is we pay twice what private landowners pay. So private landowners get an offset from the general fund. We do not. So we pay twice the rate that, say, Weyerhaeuser pays. So that was one of the first things to go. I did get that in the original bill. That then got ripped out very quickly. So I assume that it probably wouldn't make it, but the tribes managed to. So the tribes were treated the same way. The tribal lands are still out. They're actually going to be treated like private lands if this bill passes. So it's really counties that are left to fight that fight.
What's the logic behind that?
Because public or private landowners actually have firefighting resources at their disposal, and so they actually deploy. And they typically, the data is compelling when you look at it. They tend to get fires out fairly quickly on their lands because they have resources to attack it. We did historically. We used to have firefighting resources. We went away from that some time ago. But the reality is we operate much more like a private timber holder would, and the way we maintain and manage our timber. So we build roads, thinning, we're harvesting on a rotation. So my argument was we should be treated like, like the privates are. So somebody will need to carry that fight on, because it is really important to us.
Yeah,
And what is the total bill that we pay now?
We were going to be
Since we reduced
pushing,
about 40,000.
so we would be, I calculated quickly by what the numbers they provided, and we should be about 210,000, I think is what our bill will be, if this bill passes.
Without that, would be around 270,000.
So it's substantial. And I did submit my letter of resignation